There comes a time when you look in the mirror and say, enough. Enough of the pretending. Enough of accepting what chips away at your spirit. Enough of letting people slide past your boundaries like they were never there. Because you are not weak. You are not a doormat. You are not some wounded soul waiting to be healed by those who profit from your pain. You've carried hurt like it was your purpose, but suffering in silence is not your destiny. You weren't meant to nurture what's already lifeless, feed toxic flames, or endure behavior that makes you question your value. You have every right to walk away. You have every right to say, this isn't love, this isn't respect, this isn't what I was created for. If they say you're too sensitive, let them. If they say you've changed, take it as confirmation. Growth feels like betrayal to those who chose to remain stagnant. But you were never made to stay in places where your soul is starving. So today, we're calling out 6 behaviors that are completely unacceptable, non-negotiable, and should never be tolerated. Not from others and not from yourself. Understand this. Disrespect isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silent glances that dismiss you, the constant interruptions, the subtle digs wrapped in humor, or the tone that tells you you're not worth listening to. Too many of us were raised to endure that in silence, to smile through the sting, to downplay the pain, to shrink so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But silence isn't strength. It isn't peace. Sometimes, silence is the quiet burial of your self-respect. And yes, it's hard to speak up, especially if you were taught to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to always take the high road. But choosing silence in the face of ongoing disrespect isn't peacekeeping. It's self-abandonment. You're teaching people how to treat you. And if you accept it once, they'll keep serving it. Colder, sharper, more intentional. You don't have to be mean, but you must be clear. Because when you finally draw the line, they'll realize where it should have been all along. The ones who truly value you won't push your limits to test your tolerance. They won't disguise insults as jokes. They won't laugh at your dreams or mock your progress. And that gut feeling you get when someone crosses a line, that's your soul speaking. That's the moment you recognize disrespect. But we've been conditioned to silence that voice, to dismiss our discomfort, to convince ourselves that we're overreacting. But ask yourself, how many "it's not that bad" moments does it take to destroy something sacred? One act might not shatter you, but 1,000 small ones will erode your confidence, your dignity, your truth. And you have every right to stand up and say, I may have ignored this before, but that ends now. You owe that to your future self, the healed, whole version of you, to start honoring your boundaries today. Speak up not to start a fight, but to stop disappearing. It's not about aggression, it's about ownership. About walking into every space knowing that you belong there, not because someone permits it, but because your presence is powerful. When someone crosses you, they're not just testing limits, they're challenging your worth. And if you keep biting your tongue, they'll assume you've surrendered the ground you stand on. But maybe that ground needs shaking. Maybe the storm your voice brings is the one that will finally clear the air. Let them feel that shift. Let them squirm in the space where your tolerance used to be. Because respect isn't a bonus, it's the minimum. And once people see you're done bending, they'll either rise to meet your standards or remove themselves altogether. No matter how it plays out, you win, because the price of staying silent is far too steep when it slowly eats away at your sense of self. Disrespect wears many disguises. It's the boss who talks over you like your input holds no value, the partner who invalidates your feelings because you're too emotional, the friend who's always absent when you need them but front and center when they want something, and sometimes it's your own inner voice urging you to dim your light so no one feels uncomfortable. But the longer you sit in places where disrespect is dressed up as normal, the easier it is to start believing that wanting to be treated with basic dignity is asking too much. That being heard, seen, and appreciated is some kind of burden. That's the lie. That's how silence traps you, by convincing you that mistreatment is just the way things are. But when someone shows you they have no regard for your boundaries, your time, or your presence, you don't need to yell, but you do need to stand firm. You need to look them in the eye or in the mirror and say, I see what's happening, and I won't pretend it's okay anymore. Because the moment you start honoring your own voice, the world begins to adjust its volume to match it. Of course, speaking up is hard. It risks upsetting people, shaking up your comfort, and disrupting the false calm you've learned to live with. But real peace isn't about avoiding tension. It's about standing in truth. If the truth is that someone is treating you poorly, let that truth rise. Let it shake the room if it needs to. You are not here to be agreeable at your own expense. You are here to be honest with yourself. And those who thrived on your silence will always label your truth as a threat. Too much, too proud, too sensitive. But that's their discomfort, not your problem. Every time you speak up against disrespect, you're telling your inner child, your evolving self, and your deepest soul, I choose me. That choice is everything. It's where healing begins. It's where bare minimum love, empty apologies, and this is just who I am excuses lose their power. You set the tone, and if someone can't meet it, they don't belong in the picture. You don't have to raise your voice to raise your standards. You just need to be rooted. Rooted in your worth, your right to be respected, your refusal to accept crumbs where there should be nourishment. The hard truth? Some people will never fully see your value until you stop handing it to them so freely. Let them feel that absence. Let them understand that you're not available to be used, sidelined, or tolerated. You are not afraid to walk away if it means holding on to your peace. That's not selfish. That's strength. That's self-awareness. That's the quiet power of someone who knows exactly who they are and what they will no longer allow. And once you embody that energy, everything begins to shift. You no longer just repel the wrong ones. You start drawing in the people who see you clearly, who listen when you speak, and who would never dream of crossing the line because they respect your presence. But it all begins with one decision. No more silence in the face of disrespect. Not ever again. Some people will try to twist your boundaries into arrogance, call your clarity cold, or your truth inconvenient. Ignore that noise. You were never meant to live quietly so others could stay comfortable. The boldest, most alive version of you knows deep down that love without respect is manipulation, that friendship without loyalty is convenience, and that leadership without integrity is control. And the moment you fully commit to never accepting less than what you deserve, your life begins to shift on every level. Your energy changes. Your confidence deepens. You stop apologizing for existing boldly. You realize that silence was never safety. It was just delay. And now you rise, with a voice rooted in truth, with a backbone built on boundaries, and with a soul that refuses to dim itself for anyone. Disrespect might come knocking again, but this time it won't find its way in, because the door has been sealed shut with self-worth, and you finally remembered who you are. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tells you they love you, but every time they say it, it feels more like they're trying to control you than care for you? That's not love. That's manipulation dressed in charm. That's someone pulling on your emotions like strings on a puppet, tuning you to play their favorite song. And the worst part, it doesn't hit like a punch. It doesn't raise its voice. It slips in quietly, disguised as concern, affection, and what they claim is protection, until you realize it's actually control. Control over your choices, your confidence, and your ability to breathe without scanning their mood first. Real love empowers you. Real love sets you free. But manipulation traps you and calls it safety. It convinces you that you're incomplete without them, and over time you start buying into the lie. You begin to measure your value by how much of yourself you can sacrifice, how little you can ask for, how well you can keep the peace. That's not love. That's theft. It's emotional theft, and it's time to call it what it is. Because love doesn't leave you drained. Love doesn't make you question your reality. That confusion, that exhaustion, That's manipulation, plain and simple. It shows up when they guilt you for having boundaries, when your need for space becomes an act of betrayal in their eyes, when they twist your care into cruelty, and suddenly you're apologizing for trying to protect your own peace. Little by little, they teach you to confuse love with sacrifice. They make you believe that to be loved, you have to bleed. But real love doesn't weaponize your empathy. Manipulators know how to disguise chaos as passion. They know how to play both the storm and the shelter, tearing you down with one hand and pulling you in with the other, whispering, "I'm just hard on you because I care." That's not care. That's control layered in sweet words. That's someone reshaping your reality until you question your own instincts. Don't fall for that. Don't trade your inner clarity for closeness. If someone only brings you peace after they've caused the pain, that's not love, that's leverage. And notice how manipulators always keep score, but never in your favor. They tally every one of your mistakes while conveniently forgetting the times they shattered you. You keep forgiving them because your heart is genuine. But they twist that love into a burden you carry alone. Now you're not loving and you're performing. You're walking on eggshells, smiling through discomfort, silencing your truth because honesty gets turned into ammunition. That's not love. That's emotional warfare. Love doesn't trap you in mental gymnastics. Love doesn't require you to earn basic respect. If someone needs to tear you down to keep you close, it's not love. It's fear dressed up as affection. It's not partnership. It's possession. And you were never meant to be possessed. You were born to be honored. The danger lies in how familiar manipulation can feel, especially if you grew up in a home where love came with conditions, where affection had strings attached, and approval felt like a prize you had to keep earning. So when someone shows you a hint of care and then pulls it away, it feels like home. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's right. Don't mistake trauma bonds for love. Don't confuse intensity for intimacy. And don't let the past convince you that this is all you're worthy of. Because real love doesn't break you to keep you. It meets you where you are and helps you rise. Manipulators are skilled at making the highs feel so intoxicating that you begin to overlook the lows. They give just enough warmth, just enough reassurance to keep you emotionally tethered. And every time you try to walk away, they flood you with apologies, tearful promises, and emotional pleas, not because they want to grow with you, but because they want to keep you beneath them. They fear losing control more than losing you. They'll use words like forever and you're my everything to draw you back in. But love without respect is an act. And any act without truth is a lie. You don't need someone who shows up in fragments. You need someone who is safe in every version of your life, not just when it's convenient for them. Real love is consistent. It brings peace, not performance. And what many don't realize is that manipulators often isolate you in ways that aren't always physical. It starts with small seeds of doubt. Your friends don't really understand you. Your family's always too involved. Only I get you. At first, it sounds like intimacy. It sounds like deep connection. But it's not connection. It's control. They want to be the only voice you trust so they can shape your entire reality. The fewer outside perspectives you have, the easier it is for theirs to become the loudest. And soon you find yourself emotionally alone, unsure of who to believe, even questioning the people who once anchored you. That's not love. That's manipulation in its most calculated form. Because the more cut off you are, the easier it is to depend on them entirely. And when they hurt you, there's no one there to tell you it's not normal. You lose perspective. You lose yourself. That's why it's essential to stay rooted in the people who want to see you thrive in every space, not just the one they control. Someone who truly loves you will never cut you off from your lifelines. They'll encourage them. They won't fear your independence. They'll celebrate it, because love doesn't cage you. It frees you. One of the clearest signs of manipulation is when your emotions are constantly invalidated. When you express pain, they call you dramatic. When you set a boundary, they call you selfish. When you explain how you feel, the conversation somehow becomes about how you're the problem. That's not healthy communication, that's gaslighting. It's the gradual erosion of your trust in your own feelings until you doubt yourself completely. And once they've taken that from you, they can do anything they want. Because now you're convinced you're the one who's broken. You begin to believe you're difficult, that you're lucky anyone sticks around, that your needs are a burden. But none of that is true. What's true is that your emotional sensitivity is not a weakness. Your ability to care deeply is not something to be ashamed of. It's your strength. And manipulators know that. That's why they try to control it. Because someone who feels deeply has incredible power when they're aware of it. So protect your truth. Stand firm in your voice. Don't let anyone tell you your feelings are too much. Don't let anyone convince you that love should leave you confused and hurting. You're not too emotional. You're simply too aware now to be manipulated. One of the cruelest lies manipulation tells is that it's your fault. That if you were easier to love, less emotional, more accommodating, they wouldn't treat you the way they do. And you start to believe it. You start to shrink your light just to keep their darkness undisturbed. But their behavior is their choice. Their wounds are their responsibility. And no amount of self-sacrifice on your part will ever turn abuse into affection. There comes a point where you have to realize that saving them is not your job. Saving yourself is. And that takes incredible strength. It means looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I deserve more than survival. Because manipulation keeps you in survival mode. Always alert, always on edge, constantly bracing for the next emotional shift. That's not love, that's suffering. And you were not created to endure love. You were meant to live it fully, honestly, and freely. So never apologize for waking up. Never apologize for choosing truth over chaos. Never apologize for walking away from anything that tried to break you and then dared to call it love. Now you see clearly. And that clarity is your freedom. Have you ever had someone look you straight in the eyes and tell you something didn't happen when you know it did? That unsettling moment when your gut screams one thing, but their words slice through your memory until you start questioning what you saw, what you felt, what you knew. That is gaslighting. That is someone stepping into your mind and rearranging everything until your own reality feels foreign to you. It begins subtly with a casual denial here, a joke at your expense there, a soft laugh when you bring up something that matters to you. You're too sensitive, they say. Don't be so dramatic. And slowly you start shrinking. You begin wondering if you did overreact, if your memory is flawed, if the problem is actually you. That is how it starts. That is how the poison spreads. Because gaslighting doesn't just cloud your thoughts, it shakes the foundation of your spirit. Once someone can get you to doubt your own reality, they gain the power to shape it for you. They become the narrator of your life, and you're stuck trying to survive inside their version of events. But your truth is not something to be edited for someone else's comfort. Your truth is not up for debate. And anyone who needs to distort your experience just to stay in control was never offering love, only possession. Gaslighting is quiet warfare. It doesn't always shout, which is exactly why it's so dangerous. Sometimes it hides behind questions that sound like concern. Are you sure that happened? Are you sure you're remembering that right? But the underlying message is always the same. You can't trust yourself. And when that message sinks deep enough, it starts infecting every corner of your life. You begin to second guess everything. Your feelings, your instincts, your choices. You become afraid of your own voice. That's when you stop believing yourself and start depending on someone else to tell you what's real. That is where it becomes truly dangerous. Because the moment you hand over your sense of reality, you hand over your power. And they will use it. They'll use it to shrink you down, to keep you compliant, to keep you quiet. All while wearing the face of concern. I'm just trying to help, they'll say. But real help never silences. Real love doesn't erase. Love honors your truth even when it's messy. Love says, I believe you even when it's uncomfortable. Anything else is manipulation cloaked in kindness. Do not be fooled by the packaging. You deserve to live in a space where your voice is safe. One of the most painful effects of gaslighting is the way it turns you into a stranger to yourself. You stop trusting your own heart, your own mind, your own eyes. You could be surrounded by evidence of the damage, holding the proof in your own hands, and still they'll look at you calmly and say there's nothing wrong. And the more they repeat it, the more you wonder if maybe you're the issue. That is how deep it goes. That is how expertly they play the game. And the worst part is how they make you feel like you're the one who needs to apologize. Like your pain is an inconvenience. Like your reaction is the real problem. That is not love. That is psychological warfare. That is someone taking your voice and calling it irrational. Let me remind you right now, your feelings are real. Your experience is real. What you saw, what you felt, what you lived through is valid. And if someone makes you feel like you have to fight just to be heard, just to be believed, that's not love. That is control. That is someone who values power more than connection. And no human being should have to silence themselves just to make someone else comfortable. Gaslighting will have you apologizing for pain you didn't cause, for things you never did, for emotions that were always valid. It will have you walking through life barefoot on shattered glass, bleeding quietly while convincing yourself this is just how it is. And that is when the damage has gone too far. When you start protecting the very person who is breaking you because they've made you believe you're broken, that you're lucky they're even putting up with you. But hear me clearly. That is not love. That is psychological captivity. The cruelest part is they will still tell you they love you while slowly dismantling your sanity. They will call you precious while chiseling away at your foundation behind your back. But love does not silence. Love does not erase. Love does not twist your reality into something easier for someone else to handle. Your truth is not negotiable. It is your compass in the storm. And anyone who tries to take it from you is not trying to love you. They are trying to erase you. What they are really trying to do is unmake you, to unravel your sense of self piece by piece. And at some point you have to decide that your peace, your truth, your very existence is worth more than their comfort. You don't need anyone's permission to stand in your truth. You don't need approval from someone who constantly reshapes your emotions like they're revising a story that never belonged to them. You were there. You lived through it. You felt every part of it. And when something doesn't sit right in your soul, that is not paranoia. That is your intuition speaking. And manipulators hate that intuition because it's the one part of you they can't rewrite. That quiet voice that rises up when things don't add up. That subtle sense that says something's wrong. That is your internal shield. And they'll work hard to silence it. They'll say you're imagining things. That you're too emotional. That no one else would put up with you. But those are their projections. That is their dysfunction, wrapped in shame and handed to you like it belongs on your shoulders. Don't carry it. Let it fall. Because your truth doesn't need to be convenient or comfortable for anyone else. It doesn't need to be gentle or well packaged. It just needs to be yours. And the more you speak it, the more you reclaim what was taken. The more you believe it, the more you begin to breathe again. That's where freedom starts, with one decision. I believe me. Not their version, not their distortion, just me. There is something deeply cruel about being wounded and then told the pain was never real. Being told your reaction was the problem, not the betrayal. It's like being thrown into deep water and then blamed for gasping for air. That is the grip of gaslighting. It strangles your voice while pretending to care. And it hits even harder when it comes from someone you trusted. A partner, a parent, a friend, someone who should have been your refuge. Because when the person who's supposed to protect you is the same person eroding your sense of self, something inside you fractures. But even in the wreckage, they can't take away your knowing. That small, flickering flame inside you that remembers the truth. It remembers how things actually felt. It knows what really happened. And even when it's dim, even when it feels like it might go out, it still burns. That is your anchor. That is your power. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not wrong for needing to be seen and heard. What you are is awake. And being awake means you don't have to keep pretending. You don't have to live inside the lie. You can leave. You can rebuild. Because the truth always finds its way back. you are allowed to reclaim your story. Every twisted memory, every time you are made to question yourself, you get to take it back. Because gaslighting tried to erase you, but healing is where you write yourself back in. And your voice, when you let it rise, is strong. It is grounded. It is rooted in something real, and real things do not break under pressure. The truth stands. And the moment you stop asking for permission to feel, the moment you stop explaining your pain to people who never planned to understand you, that's when your power returns. That is how the pattern ends. That is how you begin to heal. Not by waiting for someone to finally admit what they did, but by standing in the mirror and saying, "I believe you." That is the beginning of your freedom. That is the moment the lie loses its grip. And that, right there, is the moment you rise. Have you ever stood in a crowded room and still felt invisible? That kind of loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being overlooked, pushed aside, treated like a shadow. That's what long-term neglect does to you. It doesn't come with slammed doors or raised voices. It comes with silence, with the absence of care, with unanswered messages and unasked questions. And after a while, you begin to wonder if maybe your presence doesn't matter. If maybe asking to be chosen is asking for too much. That's the lie neglect plants in your spirit. But listen to me. You are not an afterthought. You are not someone to be shelved until it's convenient. You are not someone who deserves to be remembered only when it serves someone else. You deserve consistent presence. You deserve real attention, the kind that doesn't require reminders, the kind that shows up out of desire, not obligation. You deserve to be someone's priority, not their backup plan, not their second option, not the one they call when everything else falls apart. You are worthy of being seen, chosen, and loved out loud. And you never have to settle for anything less again. Neglect isn't just about what someone fails to do. It's about what it teaches you to tolerate. When someone repeatedly fails to show up for you, you begin to shrink. You pull your needs inward. You start to believe that asking for anything at all is asking for too much. You soften yourself, dilute your presence, hoping that maybe if you become easier to love, they'll finally notice. But slowly, you stop asking. You stop expecting. You convince yourself that silence is safer than being let down. Still, the ache doesn't go away. It grows louder because your spirit was never meant to live on emotional leftovers. You weren't created to beg for love that barely arrives. And when someone makes a habit of neglecting you, they are showing you exactly where you fall on their list of priorities. Believe that. Don't excuse it. Don't explain it away. Because consistent neglect is not an accident. It is a decision. A decision to overlook your needs, your humanity, your worth. And you don't have to stay in that space. You don't have to keep proving that you're worthy of attention. You already are. If they can't see that, it is not your job to shrink yourself. It is their responsibility to wake up and see clearly. What cuts the deepest about neglect is not just the absence, but the message it delivers. The quiet suggestion that you don't matter enough to be missed, that your pain doesn't register, that your presence holds no weight, and that silence becomes a scream in your chest. It echoes through your thoughts, making you question your value. You wonder if maybe you're too much, or maybe not enough. You fall into a spiral that was never yours to carry. That pain is what happens when someone becomes comfortable with your consistency and starts treating your presence like a guarantee. They assume you'll always be there, no matter how little they offer in return. But love doesn't survive on assumptions. Love requires effort. Being strong does not mean tolerating emotional neglect. You are not here to be someone's afterthought or safety net. You are not a resting place for someone who's just passing through. You are not a pit stop on someone's way to something better. You are the destination. And if someone treats you like you're optional, like you're convenient but never essential, they don't deserve the wholeness of your love. Because love is not a game of distance. It is not about disappearing and returning. It is presence. It is reliability. And it is time you start demanding that. The danger of neglect is how easily it becomes normalized. You begin adjusting to the lack. A delayed reply becomes a reason to celebrate. A short conversation feels like connection. You start calling breadcrumbs a meal. That is the saddest shift, when the bare minimum starts to feel like enough. But deep down, you know love is not supposed to leave you anxious, questioning, waiting. Love is not supposed to disappear when you need it most. And yet so many of us stay. We wait. We hope. We believe that maybe one day they'll wake up and realize what they're losing. But the truth is, every day you wait for someone to decide you're worthy is a day lost in a lie. Every night you spend doubting your worth because someone else couldn't see it is a betrayal of your own heart. Let me be clear. You are not asking for too much. You are not hard to love. You are not a burden. Anyone who makes you feel like love has to be earned or chased is not offering love at all. They are offering convenience, and that is never enough. What makes neglect so painful is that it rarely comes from strangers. It comes from those who promise to be there. From friends, family, lovers, people who looked you in the eyes and swore they cared. And when they stop showing up, when they drift without explanation, when their silence replaces their presence, it leaves you spinning. You start questioning yourself, retracing every moment, trying to find the fault. But sometimes the failure isn't yours. Sometimes it's about their inability to love with the same depth you offer. Sometimes they are simply not willing to rise to meet you where you are. And yes, letting go hurts. But holding on to someone who refuses to hold you back hurts even more. You cannot keep sacrificing yourself for someone who never shows up for you. You cannot keep setting yourself on fire just to warm someone who leaves you out in the cold. Your heart deserves more than that. Your love deserves to be met with the same energy, the same consistency, the same care. Stop pleading for someone to be present. If they truly wanted to, they already would be. And if they won't, you owe it to yourself to stop waiting. There is a quiet, unshakable strength in choosing to no longer be anyone's afterthought, in recognizing that your worth isn't tied to whether someone else notices it, in knowing that your value remains intact even when others fail to acknowledge it. You do not need to chase affection. You do not need to beg for attention or bend yourself to earn what should be given freely. Real love does not require a performance. It requires presence. It requires reverence. And if someone cannot honor who you are, they do not deserve access to you. Not your energy, not your time, not the light you carry within. You have too much life in you to waste it waiting for someone to finally treat you like a priority. You have too much fire in your soul to keep dimming it for people who never once tried to reflect it back. And yes, walking away from neglect is painful. It can feel like surrender, but it's not giving up. It's waking up. It's the realization that staying in places where you're constantly overlooked is not a sign of devotion. It's a form of self-abandonment. And you weren't born to abandon yourself. You're here to rise, to be fully seen, to be held with the same care and presence you offer so freely to others. You are meant to know what it feels like to be loved completely, not in fragments, not in moments of convenience. You were never created to be someone's backup plan or emotional placeholder. You were born with undeniable worth, with presence that commands attention, with a light that deserves to be honored. And the right people will recognize that. They won't just say it, they'll show it. They'll show up with consistency, with intention, with effort that speaks louder than words. That is what you deserve. Not just pretty phrases, not just promises made in passing, but follow through. Loyalty in the hard moments. Love that doesn't disappear when it gets uncomfortable. And when you stop tolerating being treated like you are optional, you make space for something real. Something that doesn't fear your light, but celebrates it. I want that for you. I want you to understand that your heart, your time, your attention are gifts, not obligations. And they deserve to be received with care. The moment you stop settling for less is the moment you begin stepping into the love you were always meant for. And that love begins with you, choosing you, over and over, even when others forget, especially then. Have you ever shared your joy with someone and seen their smile fall just short of reaching their eyes? That subtle shift in energy, the polite tone with a cold undercurrent, is not your imagination. That is jealousy wearing a friendly face. And it's one of the hardest things to accept, because when you care deeply for someone, when you see them as family, you expect them to stand beside you when the light finally finds you. But not everyone in your life is clapping for you. Some only feel worthy when you feel small. Some remain close not out of love, but out of comparison. And when you start to rise, they begin to shrink. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your glow reminds them of everything they haven't allowed themselves to become. That is not friendship. That is quiet competition hiding behind familiar smiles. That is sabotage disguised as subtle humor. And the pain cuts deeper because it's not just their reaction, it's the realization that you've been pouring support into someone who silently hoped you'd stay behind. Real friends do not grow silent when you succeed. They do not shrink in your shine. They rise beside you, every time. Jealousy within friendship does not always come loudly. Sometimes it comes as a whisper. It arrives in the form of backhanded compliments, passive digs, jokes that leave small bruises. It's in the way they shift the conversation when you share your wins, the way they look unimpressed when you speak about your growth, the way they fall silent when you hit milestones. And at first you tell yourself stories. You think maybe they're just distracted, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's you. But eventually the pattern speaks louder than your excuses, because someone who truly loves you is never threatened by your light. They do not compete with you. They do not minimize you. They cheer loudly, genuinely, because your rise feels like theirs too. That is what real friendship looks like. That is what love without fear sounds like. And that is what you deserve to keep around you. The ones who truly care won't go silent when the spotlight finds you. They'll steady the light so it shines even brighter. And if you find yourself constantly shrinking to protect someone else's ego, if you're softening your joy just to keep them comfortable, then that isn't friendship. That's a silent battle where only one person gets to grow. That isn't love. That's fear wrapped in insecurity. That's someone who only applauds when the stage belongs to them. What hurts most is when jealousy hides behind shared history. You look at them and remember the laughs, the long talks, the nights you swore they were your forever person. But time reveals what intention tries to bury. And real friendship isn't just about the past. It's about how they treat your present. It's about how they hold space for the person you're becoming. And sometimes the ones who stood closest to you during your struggle don't know how to stand beside you during your success. They were at ease when you were uncertain, when you needed their reassurance more than you trusted your own voice. But once you found your footing, once you started speaking from purpose and walking with clarity, their tone shifted. Their jokes got meaner. Their support got thinner. Their presence started to fade. And you're left wondering if the love you believed in was ever truly there, or if they simply preferred the version of you that made them feel bigger by comparison. That truth stings. Losing someone you loved like family is never easy. But holding on to someone who quietly resents your happiness is far more damaging. That's a slow erosion of your spirit. And you deserve connections that nourish you, not ones that slowly drain you with doubt. Have you ever felt guilty for doing well, not because you hurt anyone, but because someone close to you made your growth feel like betrayal? That type of manipulation cuts deep. They won't confront you directly. Instead, it shows up in silence, in sarcasm, in offhand comments like, "Must be nice or not, all of us are that lucky." And before you even notice, you begin shrinking your victories. You tone down your progress. You hide the good news to avoid making them uncomfortable. But real love will never ask you to dim your light. Real friendship will never turn your blessings into burdens. If someone responds to your success with comparison instead of celebration, that is their internal battle, not yours. You are not responsible for managing someone else's insecurity. You are not obligated to play small so they can feel big. You are not here to dilute your joy so someone else's ego remains untouched. You were built to rise, and anyone who tries to trap you in guilt for growing does not deserve a seat at the table you worked so hard to build. People hiding jealousy will often mask it as concern. They'll say they're just looking out for you or advise you not to let it go to your head, but if you listen closely, it's not care. It's resistance disguised as wisdom. It's their discomfort projected onto your ambition. They plant doubt where there should be confidence, not because you're not ready, but because they can't stand the version of you they can no longer control. That kind of disguised envy is dangerous, because when it dresses itself as love, it becomes easy to trust. It becomes easy to believe the caution is truth, that maybe you are going too far, too fast, but you're not. You are moving at the pace of your calling, not at the speed of someone else's insecurity. Real friends breathe belief into your vision. They don't hold umbrellas over your dreams. They walk through the storm beside you. So be careful who you let influence the way you see yourself. Not every voice deserves a place in your mind. One of the deepest betrayals isn't the one who leaves, it's the one who stays just to keep you contained, who hovers close just to track your movement, who keeps you within arm's reach, not to support you, but to make sure you don't rise too far. That kind of false friendship is exhausting. It leaves you confused because they're still there, still checking in, but every interaction chips away at your confidence. That's the subtle power of envy. It doesn't always want your downfall. Sometimes it just wants you grounded, manageable, within reach. Because as long as you stay small, they never have to face their own refusal to grow. The moment you begin to walk in your confidence, the moment you start doing what others were too afraid to attempt, your very presence becomes a mirror, and some people cannot bear what it reflects. That's not your fault, and it's not yours to fix. Your only responsibility is to keep evolving, to keep shining, to keep stepping into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Even if that journey means outgrowing those who were never capable of loving you in your entirety. Some people only loved the version of you that needed saving, but the real ones love every version, especially the one that stands strong without them. You need people in your life who celebrate your wins without hesitation, who cheer for you with volume and pride, who remain present when the spotlight turns in your direction. The people who don't flinch when good things come your way, who don't keep score, who don't secretly resent your rise, are the people worth holding close. Real friends don't compete with your growth. They amplify it. They don't measure your success against their own. They remind you that you've earned every moment of it. And if you haven't found those people yet, it's okay to keep your circle small until you do. Don't let loneliness convince you to keep shallow company. You are not here to babysit egos or water yourself down to make others feel secure. You are here to shine, to expand, to become. And the ones who truly care will never be intimidated by your light. Let the ones who can't handle your growth drift away. Let the envy show itself, because when it does, you'll make space for the kind of love that honors you fully. You don't need lukewarm loyalty. You don't need silent bitterness. You need people who lift you without limits. And that's not asking too much. That's the baseline. You deserve nothing less. Kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. It should never be a reason for others to take advantage of your heart, to dismiss your needs, or to treat you like an endless supply of patience and peace. But the truth is, many people don't know how to respect softness. They assume that because you lead with love, you won't draw the line. They believe that because you choose peace, you'll stay quiet even when it's hurting you. But your kindness is not a flaw. It's not an opening for disrespect. It's a powerful, beautiful quality in a world that often forgets how to feel deeply. Still, even the kindest souls break when stretched too far. You can be full of love and still say no. You can have the biggest heart in the room and still protect your energy. Being kind doesn't mean being everyone's safe place. It doesn't mean allowing access to people who only take. Your kindness is not something to be expected, it's something to be appreciated. And it's time to start guarding it like the treasure it is. It's painful when people only show up with open hands, when they drain your spirit and then disappear the moment you need something in return. That's not love, that's convenience. And when your generosity is treated like a service, when your compassion is reduced to usefulness, it leaves you hollow. Because you are not a lifeline for people who would never throw you one. Those who abuse your kindness often know exactly how good your heart is. That's why they keep coming back. Not for you, but for what they can take. And it hurts most when you believe that giving more will finally open their eyes, that they'll finally recognize your worth. But they won't. Not until you stop offering your energy so freely to people who would never meet you halfway. Kindness does not mean neglecting your well-being. It does not mean proving your value through overextension. It means choosing to give from a place of love, not from pressure, not from guilt. Sometimes the hardest lesson is accepting that not everyone has your heart. You remember the details. You show up even when it's hard. You pour love into the cracks others try to hide. And still, there are people who only remember you when it suits them, who lean on you in their pain but vanish in your silence. That disconnect is not a reflection of your flaws. It's a reminder of your depth. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are exactly enough, just as you are. The problem was never your kindness. The problem lies with those who never learned how to respect it, who mistook your generosity as weakness, who saw your open heart as an invitation to take more than they ever planned to give. But let me tell you, there is nothing soft or fragile about continuing to love in a world that constantly tests your spirit. It takes strength to keep showing up, to stay open after being hurt, to still offer warmth when you've been met with cold. But your love should never become a leash. Your generosity should never bind you to people who only dial your number when they're desperate. You are more than someone's emergency solution. There comes a moment when you have to stop trying to prove your love to people who refuse to understand it. You give and they question why it wasn't more. You help and they doubt your intention. You stay and they act as if your loyalty is something owed. That kind of treatment chips away at your soul. It makes you doubt your instincts. It makes you feel guilty for needing space. It makes you believe that saying no is selfish, when in truth, no is sacred. No is how you survive. And the more you allow people to walk over you in the name of being good, the harder it becomes to remember your own worth. You start to define your value by how much pain you can carry for others. But love isn't meant to hurt like that. Compassion should never cost you your peace. If someone only sees your worth in terms of what you do for them, they never valued you, only the benefit of your presence. And when that benefit disappears, their true feelings surface. You deserve to be loved, not used. You deserve to be appreciated, not accessed. Your kindness is not a discount. Stop letting people pay less than your worth. You owe nothing to those who only disturb your peace. You owe no loyalty to those who weaponize your empathy. Too often we confuse being kind with being passive. We think goodness means never saying no, never walking away, never cutting people off. But you can have a gentle spirit and still draw a hard line. You can be compassionate and still protect yourself. You can care deeply and still say, I will not be treated like this. That isn't cruelty, that's self-respect. And if someone can't handle your boundaries, it means they were never truly honoring your kindness. They were depending on your silence. They were feeding off your willingness to bend. But you get to stop that. You get to say, this ends here. Your heart is powerful, but it's not a doormat. Stop letting people wipe their mess on your spirit simply because you're compassionate. You can be both kind and clear, loving and firm, open and unshakable. That is real strength. And when you finally start protecting your energy, some people will call you cold. The same people who drained you will act surprised when you stop letting them. But you haven't changed. You've simply stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You've learned that loving others doesn't mean breaking yourself. You don't have to burn out just to light the way for people who wouldn't walk one step for you. That isn't love. That's self-neglect. And it hurts when you realize that some people only stick around because you were easy to use. The moment you need support, they disappear. The moment you draw a boundary, they resist. But don't let that shake your faith in your own heart. You were never wrong for caring. You were never wrong for showing up. But now, it's your time. Now you begin to love yourself with the same passion, the same consistency, the same kindness you've always given to others. And the ones who truly love you will not be threatened by that shift. They will celebrate it. Because the people who really care about you want to see you whole, not emptied by everyone else's needs. There is quiet, steady power in reclaiming your kindness, in standing tall and saying, I will not be used anymore. You still love, you still give. But you've stopped offering your heart to those who treat it like a transaction. You no longer give away your joy to people who wouldn't lift a finger to protect yours. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom. That's the kind of growth that comes from knowing your worth too clearly to be drained again. Because there is nothing brave about being broken in silence for the sake of seeming kind. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to want relationships that give as much as they take. You are not just someone's healer or helper. You are a whole being with needs, dreams, and a heart that deserves to be cherished, not just used. So protect your kindness like the treasure it is, because it is rare, and it is yours. Offer your kindness to those who cherish it. Share it with the ones who reflect it back, and walk away from anyone who treats it like a given. Because you were not made to be used. You are here to be loved, seen, and embraced in full, without condition, without question. If you've ever felt like your softness was mistaken for weakness, like your loyalty was stretched thin until it hurt, or like your love was constantly taken but rarely returned, let this moment land deep in your soul. These are not just words. This is a reminder, a wake-up call. You were never meant to carry the weight of people who only take, who twist your truth to suit their comfort, who disguise control as affection, who smile while hiding envy, or treat your presence like a convenience they return to only when it serves them. You are here for something higher. You are meant to walk tall, to hold your boundaries with pride, to speak your truth without apology, to give love without losing yourself in the process. You are here to help without being handled, to care without being crushed under the weight of those who won't carry themselves. You deserve a life where your kindness is met with respect, where your truth is honored, where your love is returned in kind, and where your worth is recognized without you having to beg for it. The burdens of manipulation, gaslighting, jealousy, neglect, and emotional abuse were never yours to carry. You weren't born to spend your life explaining your value to people determined to misunderstand it. You were born to rise, to give wisely, to love deeply but carefully, and to walk away from anything that threatens your peace. And if walking away means leaving behind what's familiar, then do it with your head high. If it means starting fresh, then begin with strength. Because the moment you stop accepting what breaks you is the moment you start living fully. That is when your true life begins. A life where your peace isn't something granted by someone else. It's something you protect fiercely. A life where your kindness isn't drained but returned. A life where your light isn't hidden, it's honored. So move forward with bold love for yourself. Let those who truly see your heart rise to meet you. Let anyone who came only to take from you fade into the background. You don't need a crowd. You need truth. You need real connection. You need love that frees you, not love that binds you. Guard your heart, but don't harden it. Set your boundaries without dimming your warmth. Stay kind, stay open, but be powerful enough to never be used again. The world doesn't need your silence. It needs your voice, your spirit, your courage. Keep moving, keep growing, keep loving with discernment. And never forget, being good does not mean being taken for granted. It means choosing your peace, standing in your truth, and knowing when to walk away from what no longer honors your soul. Thank you for opening your heart, for listening, and most of all, for choosing yourself today. Stay rooted, stay kind, and never settle for anything less than the love and life you were born to live.